in a few minutes. But for now, just know this, that we ask you to go online to read some information about your topic, but then in the end, you have to put that information into your own words. And that is called paraphrasing. So it comes from the verb paraphrase, to write information using your own language. Okay, so that's the topic of today's lesson. And so watch and you'll learn about what paraphrasing is, you'll learn some tips, and you'll learn how to do it. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, the objectives of this lesson. By the end of this lesson, we are hoping that you will be able to understand what paraphrasing is, why this skill is important, the 3 stages of paraphrasing, and important steps in each stage. So what is paraphrasing? Paraphrasing is rewriting the text. So when you find a source of information, what you read is the text. So what we're asking you to do is rewrite the text in your own words while keeping the meaning the same as the original passage. So paraphrasing is approximately the same length of the original, and it keeps the meaning intact. Intact means the same. Okay, let's take a moment and compare this to what we ask you to do in your reading class. Because in your reading class, we ask you to summarize it. So in that case, when you have a paragraph, we ask you to write about the main idea in about 2 sentences. Paraphrasing is different because it's about the original length of the passage. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so we know what paraphrasing is. Now, paraphrasing is not what? So, you cannot just change a couple of words. You cannot just delete a couple of words or phrases. And you cannot just rearrange, which means change the order of some words. If you only do these, then you are not paraphrasing. The result will be that your passage will look too similar to the original. Okay, so we're going to have to learn how to rewrite a passage in a way that it looks different and uses different language than the original. Why do we need to do that? It's really about academic fairness and academic honesty. Okay, why? Well, basically we do it to avoid plagiarism. What is plagiarism? So when students and professors, when you submit a paper, in other words, when you hand in a paper, the language that you use must not be copied from the source. In other words, you can't just copy and paste from the source. If you do that, it's called plagiarism. It means that you haven't changed enough of it. And plagiarism is actually considered academic theft or stealing. Why? Because you're stealing the original author's ideas or words or language. Why is this important not to do it? It's important not to plagiarize because the author spent a lot of time revising and editing and using the language that was perfect for the author to communicate their ideas. And so if that source was posted on the internet, that means that the author was successful. So the language is the author's, really. So what's our job as writers? We can read about the ideas, but in the end we have to use our own language to communicate about it. Okay, did you know that there are online apps to check for plagiarism? Okay, I'll just read this statement. Online apps can give a plagiarism score. So in other words, online apps can give the student who submitted the paper and the professor receiving it a plagiarism score. What's a plagiarism score? It's a percent of how much of the paper was copied from a source. So in other words, copy-pasted from a source. It also names the sources. So for example, if you submit a paper onto Blackboard, you might get a score of 25%. That means that 25% of the language you use was actually copied and it appears to be exactly the same as a source. And also, if you print a report, you and your professors can see what the sources of the information were. So it takes us back to the original. What are we accepting at CASAL? Let's wait and find out what the writing coordinator suggests will be the maximum amount that you're allowed to have that looks similar to the source. Okay, so I mentioned Blackboard. I know you heard it. That's right. Blackboard uses a filtering system called Turnitin. Okay, and what Turnitin does is it will tell us the score, how much your paper is similar to papers online. Okay, so where do we begin then? Okay, like writing, paraphrasing has stages. You learned in writing that there's the pre-writing phase or stage, there's the writing stage, and then there's the editing stage. Paraphrasing is similar. It has stages, and each stage must be completed in order to be successful. What's the first stage? Well, the first stage is reading the source. So you've got to read that source information carefully. The second stage is writing. So that's the paraphrasing itself, when you're writing and you're using your own words. The third stage is checking. What this means basically is checking the accuracy of your paraphrase. Okay? In other words, you want to check that the meaning is intact. So, what are the stages again? First, read. Second, write. Third, check. What are you checking for? You're checking that your paraphrase is accurate. Okay, check for accuracy. What does that mean? We don't want to add new ideas to the paraphrase. Okay, we just want to put the ideas into our own words. Okay, let's talk about the first stage then. The first stage is reading. You do a lot of this in your reading course already, where you have to read a paragraph or a passage and you have to pull out the main idea and the key information. It's very similar to that. Okay, you've got to read the passage carefully. Identify the main ideas. Identify key information. How do you do that? Highlight. Use a highlighter and take margin notes, just like you do in reading class. Okay, what are some extra tips for you at the reading stage? Read the source passage a few times. The reason we suggest this is because the source passage can have very difficult language. Sometimes the vocabulary is very high level, sometimes the grammar is very complex, and sometimes the writer uses passive voice, not active voice. So we really need to figure out who is doing what. For those reasons, read the passage a few times to make sure that you truly understand it. Okay? Once you feel like you've got the gist, which means the main idea and the key information, look away. This becomes really important, okay? Look away from the text. Why? Because that way you won't copy the same language. Next, write down what you understand.